You say disease first begins with emotions, then it spreads to the mind. And when that's unchecked, later it appears in the body in the form of specific symptoms.
See a physical disease happening in the body, they say that this is the end product of what has happened in the emotions at the mental level and prior to that at the emotional level. So that's the reason why they say that disease often begins first at the level of the emotions, and then once the emotions get out of control, it shows up in the mental aspect of our body, and then from there it shows up in the physical body in the form of symptoms. And this is true, even modern medicine tells you that they don't talk about the three levels, but they say the mind. Okay, they talk about the body mind integration.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for doing this. You're my first Ayurveda teacher, and I am very grateful that you gave me your time, and you're going to be enlightening us with so much knowledge today. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for calling me.
So let's start with the most basic question: what is Ayurveda?
Okay, so if you talk about the definition and the science behind it, so Ayu actually means age or lifespan, and Veda means the knowledge. Okay, so basically, there's nothing but, even though we get the impression that it's all about a medicinal system, if you go by the definition, all it's telling you is how to lead a good life. Okay, Ayurveda, the knowledge of life, the knowledge of living. Okay, but when it comes to knowledge of living, it means knowledge of living where you have optimal health. Okay, and so the entire science deals with different kinds of programs or tools or tips by which you can have optimal health and optimal living. Okay, and then towards the end, what the text says, that in case if you happen to move away from that path, whatever we have told you, and in case if you happen to move away from the path where you are now inviting disease or a disease condition, then what do you do? Okay, because the actual term Ayurveda doesn't have anything about herbs or disease or anything. But what they've done is, towards the end, they talk about, in case if you don't follow the protocol, in case if you don't follow the guidelines, okay, and then if you happen to have disease, then what do you do? So that's a part of Ayurveda where they talk about various kinds of treatment procedures, treatment options, preventive measures, preventive options. They talk about herbs, they talk about lifestyle, they talk about sleep, they talk about dietary practices, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's a programmatic approach to experience optimal health. And that's what the science is all about.
I love the way that you said optimal health, because we just talk about good health, but optimal health it's much more stronger. And in your book, you talk about this concept of fractionated life, and you treating our body, mind, and emotions as separate entities, right? So can you paint a picture of what this looks like in someone's daily life, and how does this disconnection actually manifest as disease?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So when the reason I said optimal health is because we have to remember that optimal health is our
Yeah.
own property. Okay, and so we need to take good care of our health. Now, remember, there are hundreds and hundreds of books on diet, hundreds and hundreds of books on lifestyle, hundreds and hundreds of books on exercise, hundreds of books on emotion management. But yet, as a society,
Yes.
why are we not healthy? Okay, I mean, these books are there, there are guides, and we read them, we talk about them, but yet as a society, why we're not healthy? The reason is that almost all the books that are that describe these topics about wellness and health and wellness, okay, they are incomplete. Okay, what do you mean by that? For example, now the books on diet will only talk about diet alone, and they don't address emotion.
Right.
They don't talk about exercise. Okay, programs on physical exercise, any books on physical exercise will usually focus on the benefits and techniques of specific activities like gym or Zumba or yoga or Tai Chi, but they don't talk about dietary programs. They don't talk about emotional management. Okay, similarly, any books on management of emotions will avoid discussing about diet, sleep, and exercise. So basically what you're getting is when you read these books, you're only getting a fractionated knowledge. You're not getting a complete knowledge. Okay, and in my opinion, what I think is that disease, poor health, suffering primarily arises when the mind and body are
Mm.
not in alignment. They are not functioning as one unit. Okay, because the reason is, when we define ourselves as humans, okay, we have to remember that we are just not the physical body alone. We are the body, the mind, and the emotions. Okay, so which means then at any given time, you have to ensure that your body, mind, and emotions are all functioning as one unit. If it's not, then that's a fractionated living. A fractionated living is the one which results in poor health. Okay. On the other hand, if you keep your body, mind, and emotions as functioning as one unit, that is what I call as unfractionated approach. Okay, and that approach will lead to optimal health. It will lead to good health. It will lead to wellness. Okay. Now, for example, now let me tell you. Let's say, and I'll give you an example for this. Let's say you're cooking the food. Okay, you're cooking for the family. Okay, right at that moment, okay, your mind has traveled elsewhere. Your mind is thinking about the boss, or about your work, or about your kids in school. Okay, so what's happening is, even though your hand is busy doing some work, doing some cooking aspect, your mind is thinking about some other aspect. And especially if it's something to do with work, or children, the
Yeah.
mind is going to get stressed out. Now remember, we as humans, we are nothing but bundles of energy. Okay, so that stress in the mind, because you're thinking about work, or about children, or about family, or about your parents, or whatever it is, if it's creating a stress, that energy now is entering through your body into the food. Okay, and that is the food that you're going to eat. You're going to serve others as well. Okay, so the question is, whether it is cooking, whether it is eating, whether it's sleeping, the question is, are we in tune? In the sense, are our mind, emotions, and body in tune with that specific act? Okay, so which means then, 24 by 7, whatever we do, we have to ensure that our mind, our emotions, and our body is focused, or is on that given task. And that is what I call as unfractionated living. Okay, and that is what leads to good health. That is what leads to optimal
That's
health.
wow. I'm very, very inspired because I think it definitely gives us a picture that if we are able to lead a life of balance, we can live in optimal health. But there's so many pillars, like you mentioned, right? Eating, sleeping, emotional health, everything, exercise. So let's break it down, Dr. Rao. So let's start with eating mindfully. And there's so much noise about what to eat, right? There's these fad diets like vegan, keto, paleo, you name it. There's so many out there. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, what are some fundamental principles about eating that our listeners should actually really understand before they even think about which diet to follow?
Right. That's a very good question, because again, we've been bombarded with books about dietary practices, and everybody that has a favorite, or a
Influencer.
personalized
Yeah.
influence about specific diet will say that that's a diet that works. And so it comes onto the social media, and everybody wants to follow that. And that's the reason why we have all these kinds of diet that you just mentioned: paleo diet, vegan diet, and uh, juice diet, and so on and so forth. So here's the thing. Okay, people get the wrong impression that we are because whatever we eat. But if you look at the Ayurvedic and yogic texts, and now even modern medicine tells you, you are not just what you eat, you are when you eat, how you eat, where you eat, and why you eat. So there are 5 things that you have to address. Okay, so what you eat is one little aspect of the eating practices. So for now, my suggestion is, even if you're worried, okay, am I eating the right kind of diet? Okay, am I eating the right amount of carbs? Am I eating the right amount of proteins? Am I eating the right kind of fats? Okay, my suggestion is, don't worry about those aspects, because you may have the best of the diets, but if that diet is being practiced, if you're eating the diet in front of a TV, or if you're
Hmm.
doing that in front of a computer, okay, that diet is not going to give you any benefits. Okay, number one. Number two, you may be given the best of the diet, the most expensive and most favorable caloric diet. Okay, but if you eat that at 10:30 in the night, or 11 o'clock in the night, when the body's eating clocks, the clock genes for eating is no longer active. But if you're eating at around that time, that food is now going to be turning into a poison. Okay, so it's not just about what you eat. So we have to remember very closely that it's just not about what we are eating. It's about where we're eating, when we are eating, how we are eating. Okay, So for example, now let's say, for now, let's not worry about paleo diet or keto diet or vegan diet. Okay, let's just follow whatever dietary practices we're eating. Okay, be it vegetarian, non-vegetarian, whatever. Okay, the question is now, okay, let's think about what all things. So when you eat, timings of the food is extremely important. Okay, both Ayurveda and yoga texts, they talk about keeping a minimum gap of 3 to 4 hours between two meals. Okay, and when I say two meals, see, remember one thing. Whenever the minute we think about a meal, we always think about a big plate with a lot of food items. Okay, even eating an apple is a meal. Eating one banana is a meal. Okay, having a cup of chai is a meal. Okay, so which means then, if you have to keep a gap of 3 to 4 hours between two meals, let's say one meal was have a banana, okay, and a second meal is going to be a full-fledged meal, okay. Even then, even though you may have had just one banana, still, because that is a meal, once you eat that banana, make sure that the next meal is coming only after 3 to 4 hours. You cannot keep on eating every half an hour. Okay. See, remember one thing. Whenever we get stressed, okay, our mouth and our brain is looking for security from the stress. And the security from the stress comes only when you have something on your mouth. This is it's a known thing. From the time we were born, okay, we felt secured. See, we first felt secured when we latched onto our mother's breasts, okay, and started taking the milk. Okay, so since then, that aspect of something on the mouth gives us assurance or gives us a protection. And so even as adults, when we get stressed out, we reach out for food because food provides us security. Okay, but we have to remember that if you have already eaten something, you don't want to eat again immediately. Okay, and now, so meal timings is very important. Between two meals, you have to keep a 3 to 4 hour gap. Number one. Number two, okay, between dinner and sleep, you have to keep a 3 hour gap. Okay, and ideally you have to sleep by 10:30 or 11, because that's when the sleep gene is active. Just as a watch tells us the timings, we have clock genes in our brain. These clock genes are responsible for certain activities. Okay, so we have clock genes for digestion, we have clock genes for appetite, we have clock genes for meal timings, we have clock genes for physical activity. In the same way, we have clock genes for sleep as well. That's when the melatonin production increases. Okay, so around the time of 9 or 10 is when you should supposed to sleep. Now imagine, is that what we do these days?
No.
No, most of us eat at 10 in the
Yeah.
night. Okay, so timings becomes very important. Secondly, once you have finished your dinner, the next day morning, okay, when you break your fast, okay, a fast, it's better that you break your fast 12 hours of a gap. Okay, that's what Ayurveda recommends, and that's what modern medicine now tells you, that a minimum of 12 to 15 hours of gap between the last meal and the next day morning's meal is extremely good for the body to keep it at an optimal health. Okay, so when becomes very important, timing becomes very important. How becomes very important. Okay, how are you eating your food? Okay, are you holding it with your fingers? Are you chewing your food? Chewing is something that we all have to practice, because chewing does so many important things. It connects your mouth to the brain. The brain will then will then tell the mouth how much of enzyme should be released, how much of saliva should be released, okay, and how much of force and how much of pressure should be added to the food, so that it can get pulverized in the mouth. See, because remember, we have 32 not in the gut, but we have it in the mouth, and there is a reason why we have them in the mouth. Okay,
Yeah.
people swallow the food. If they swallow the food as is, the even though we have HCl in the gut, okay, in Ayurveda we call it Agni,
Mm.
and in modern sense we call it hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid cannot chew the food. Okay, so what happens is, you have partial food that is entering the body, partial food that is entering the stools, okay, which is not good for your health. So you have to chew your food. Okay, where becomes very important. Are you eating in front of your computer? Are you doing your computing work while eating? Okay, are you eating in front of your TV? Are you eating on your bed? See, remember one thing. When because of the way we have our work schedule, we don't have time to step out and eat our food. So most of us end up eating in front of our laptops. Okay, so now remember the fractionated and unfractionated living. So here's a good example. When you're eating, your mouth is doing the act of chewing, Okay, your fingers are taking the food, but where is your mind? Your mind is on the database. Your mind is on the work. Okay, it's a fractionated living because your mind is not focusing on what you're eating. You're not able to appreciate the taste. You're not able to appreciate the smell. You're not appreciating the texture, and you're forgetting to chew your food. Okay, so all these aspects are extremely important. Okay, why are you eating food? Basically, for what purpose? Okay, even though we say we are eating our food because we want to live and aspire, and then because we have certain aspirations for a goal. I mean, a goal for a career, for our careers, for our family, for our kids, and all that. Yeah, that's all fine. But beyond that, everybody, there's a reason why there's a billion population in this country. I mean, in this world, and the reason is that we are here to live not just for ourselves, but to serve the society as well. Okay, so serving the society is a ideal thing. Now, if you want to live to serve society, you have to ensure that you're eating the right way.
Yeah.
Okay, so eating is not just about what you eat. Eating is all these aspects. Okay, now once you address all this, and if you still want to benefit from what you eat, okay, from the food that you eat, then you can start addressing, what should I focus on? Should I focus more on proteins or carbs or fats or juices and all that? Okay, but first you have to address these things: when, how, where, and why. Because if you address these things, then it doesn't matter whether you are eating a salad, or whether you're eating a juice, or whether you're just taking a juice, or whether you're taking only carbs, or whether you're taking only proteins. It'll all get digested very well, and you'll be able to benefit from whatever you're eating.
That's very true. Sometimes, when I'm watching TV or, when we're just sitting scrolling on the phone while eating, we either eat too much or maybe too less, right, Dr. Rao?
Mhm.
Because we're not mindful. We don't even know what's going in, how our stomach is feeling. But then when we actually put away all these distractions and just sit with the food, we actually end up making our plate more colorful and enjoyable, and we actually even cherish the meal even more. And I know the second part to that was what we eat, right? So before we get into what we eat, what are the timings that we're actually supposed to be eating? I know you said we have to wrap up the day by 10 p.m, post meal. So does that mean we have to eat around 6:37, which is 3 hours before sleep, and then breakfast at 7 a.m., because that's 12 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the timings, okay. And by the way, Dolika, let me make it very clear here. Whatever I'm saying is I'm drawing it from the Vedic
Yeah.
text, okay. But this is all now supported by evidence-based research studies as well,
Right.
okay. So if you talk about the timings, all right. So if you have a chart, okay, and in the chart you have the timings. Let's say at 12, if you put a timings there, and let's assume that we are going to stick to, let's say, 4 hour gap between two meals.
Mm.
Okay, if you're going to stick to 4 hour gap between two meals, then what happens is, in a 12-hour window, you're going to end up having only three meals.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the dinner time first. So let's say you have your dinner at around 6 o'clock. Okay, that's an ideal time because that's when the sun sets. See, what happens is, if you look at the clock genes, they slowly rise as the sun rises. Okay, and then the clock genes peak when the sun is at its peak, which is 12 noon. Okay, and then the clock genes start receding. So by 6 o'clock or so, when the sun is setting, the clock genes are not very active. They are quite passive.
Mm.
Okay, so now that's the time when people eat their big meal around 6:30 or 7. Okay, that is no, because both morning and evening, when the sun is when the sun is rising and the sun is setting, the clock genes are not very active. So those are the two timings where you have to eat a small meal. Okay, now when the sun is at its peak, okay, digestion is very very strong because our stomach and our brain, they tap into the sun's position. Okay, and this again is, it's not, even though it is mentioned in Vedic texts, evidence based studies clearly show that it's called, in fact the term they use is chronobiology or chrononutrition. Okay, it indicates that we are in tune with the movement of the earth and the sun. Okay, so let's say at 6 you decide to have your last meal at 7 o'clock. Let's put it 7. Okay, I'm let me not be very restrictive. So 7 o'clock, let's say you have your dinner at 7, which means now if you're giving a gap of 3 hours for to sleep, you can conveniently and nicely sleep around 10 o'clock because you have 3 hours. Okay, so that is fine. Or you can sleep at 11 o'clock. You don't have to worry because you're not eating anything. Okay, so once you finish your dinner at 7, you want to make sure that you're not going to eat anything else. In this country, or back in India as well, we like to eat something warm just before we go to bed. We take a glass of warm milk, or in this country, they eat a cookie or a chocolate or something like that. Okay, they'll say, oh yeah, we're feeling hungry. Once you finish your dinner, there's no question of hunger. You have to stop eating after 7. Okay, that's the last meal. Give the body some time to rest, give the brain some time to rest. Okay, and the rest period should be a minimum of 12 hours, which means until next day morning 7 o'clock you don't want to eat anything. Now what happens is, it's very interesting. Why did the Vedic text say that you have to give a 12-hour gap? Now we know. What evidence-based studies tell us is that unlike other systemic organs, the brain cannot cannot function without a source of oxygen and without a source of calories. Okay, it needs a continuous level of calories. Now, because you have stopped eating after 7, the brain at around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning does not receive calories because it's all digested. Okay, so what does the brain do now?
Shuts off.
It starts breaking the fats. Okay, the fats now serve as the energy reserve. Okay, they are the energy reserve. It's like switching between your gas and your hydrogen vehicle. If you're a hybrid vehicle, it's switching between gas and hydrogen. Okay, in the same way, the brain switches from carbs to fat, because now fats serve as the energy reserve. The breakdown products of that fat is extremely good for the brain and for the body. Okay, so and that breakdown products is extremely important to to prevent from having any inflammatory conditions, to prevent you from having any kind of chronic conditions. It prolongs your aging. It has a better it has a, it promotes good health. Okay, not only that, in the brain it promotes what we call neuroplasticity. Okay, so but this will happen only if you allow the brain to switch from the carb to fat digestion, and that will happen only when you give a 12-hour gap. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's say, so you're given a 12-hour gap. Next day morning at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, you can break your fast. Okay, so you can have a meal at around 7:30 or 8. Okay, now if you're going to have a meal at 8, okay, you don't want to eat anything after 8. Okay, you have to keep a 3 hour or 4 hour gap, which means then you're going to have a straight, you're going to have a lunch. Okay, so 8 o'clock breakfast, lunch at 12 or 12:30, and then 6 o'clock or say 6:30 you're going to have a
Dinner.
dinner. Okay, so 3 meals is done, and you're following all the timings very well. Okay, now if at all we say no, 3 meals is not sufficient, some people 3 meals is not
Yeah.
sufficient. Okay, some people can in fact, when I'm at the Shivananda ashram in Bahamas, they have only 2 meals, one at 10:30 or 11, and the other one is at 6. That's it. Okay, now people who are residents of the ashram, of the monks and spiritual masters, they can very well be on that diet. Okay, for them it is very good. For people like us who are doing all kinds of work, we have families, we have kids, we have jobs and all that, we need more energy. All right, so then 3 meals may not be sufficient for all of us. Then what you can do is keep a gap of 3 hours, which means that you can squeeze in one more meal. So instead of 3 meals, you can conveniently have 4 meals with a 3 hour gap between each meal. Okay, so which means then if you have a meal at 12, a big meal at 12, you can conveniently have another snack at around 3 o'clock. That's the time when you can have, instead of having a coffee or a chai, you can have fruits,
Fruits.
you can have nuts. Fruits and nuts are extremely good. Okay, and so if you're going to have a 3 o'clock break where you're going to have a snack, then you can conveniently have another meal at around 7. You're still giving the gap of 3 to 4 hours. So you see,
Nice.
so you can squeeze in 4 meals in a day without worrying about the gut timings, by keeping that 3 hours interval. Okay, or if you want, you can even squeeze in, you can just keep a 3 meal a day by keeping a 4 hour gap. So either way, you're going to ensure that you're following the timings. Okay, and you're following all the other
Yeah.
practices. Okay, this will really help in moving along, having an optimal health. You don't even have to worry about what kind of food you're eating if you're following these principles.
That's awesome, Dr. Rao. And one thing that you reminded me of is in the book you talk about this briefly as well, and I wanted to elaborate on it during the podcast. You said when we have high levels of stress, we shouldn't be eating. So can you tell us why we shouldn't be eating and what exactly is happening physiologically?
Right. So what happens is, whenever we are stressed out, so there's a reason why, um, you know there's two kinds of stresses. Okay, we have what we call acute stress, which is really good. So for example, now let's say you're about to face an interview,
Hmm.
or let's say you're sitting to write an exam. Okay, or let's say you've got a long you've got a long drive that'll require you to cross 3 or 4 states. Okay, so you need that stress. That's a good stress, that you need that stress to combat all those events. Okay, that is good, but it's only the chronic part of the stress that is not good, because chronic stress is deleterious. Okay, so whenever we eat, okay, before we sit to eat, it's very important that we reflect on how our mind is. Okay, is our mind too stressed out? Are there too many dramas? Are we feeling overwhelmed? Are we experiencing any kind of fear, worry, anxiety, anger, depression, rage, of or judgment of any kind? Okay, because what happens is any kind of mental or emotional issues will trigger what we call the flight or the fight response. Okay, the flight or the fight response is a response wherein the brain now triggers hormones which tries to combat the situation. So but these hormones, if they stay in the body for a long time, they can create havoc. Okay, things like adrenaline. Okay, so we talk about the adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
The adrenaline rush is required for certain situations, but then the same adrenaline or cortisol can create a havoc with our digestion. Okay, it's very imperative that we remain calm while eating. Okay, because any time when the levels of dopamine and cortisol are extremely high, what happens is they combat the digestive hormones. Okay, we have numerous hormones involved in the digestion process. It's involved in the absorption process. Okay, so if and those hormones are very sensitive to the presence of dopamine and cortisol. Okay, so whenever you have stress, okay, it can create a havoc by inhibiting the activities of these gut hormones, okay, which are involved with digestion and absorption. Okay, and that can impinge on your digestion, it can impinge on your absorption. So now imagine if you're sitting in front of the TV and eating your food. Okay, and if you're watching a violent movie, what's going to happen is, along with the food, along with the hormones that are released for digesting the food, you're also releasing, even though even though you may feel that the movie is good or something, but the very fact that you're absorbing a violent scene from the movie, immediately what will happen is dopamine and cortisol will get released. They will now enter our gut, and they will block the activities of the digestive hormones. And that's the reason why, in general, whenever we are stressed out, they say that try not to eat for at least 15 to 20 minutes, calm down before you eat. Okay, now the same principle holds true, not just when you're eating. Okay, even when you're cooking,
Hmm.
there's a reason why, if you look at our traditions, at our old at our my when I was young, when I used to visit my grandparents. Okay, they had a very small house. There was like just one living room, and then there was a big kitchen. Part of the kitchen, they had the altar. Okay, and usually what happens is, this house would have like 10 to 15 people. Okay, and what happens is, every half an hour somebody or the other would come in, and then they would light an incense stick, or they would pray, or they would recite the mantras. Why was all that happening? Okay, I understand there's an altar, but why those sounds, and why the incense, and why the lamps and all that? Because that kept the person who was cooking the food in a state of calmness. See, because you're listening to the sounds of chanting. Okay, you're getting the friends, the smell of the incense. Okay, all that kept the person calm while they're cooking the food. And those days, when they're cooking the food, they were cooking not just for themselves, they were cooking for a large family. Now, even though we are a small family, but still the same principles holds true. How is your brain, how is your mind, how is your emotion when you're cooking the food?
Yeah.
Okay, same thing. You don't want dopamine, you don't want cortisol in your body when you're cooking the food. So any kind of pleasant sounding, harmonious sounds, while cooking or even while eating your food. They always say that instead of watching a TV, try to play some kind of a soothing sound, natural sounds, eating your food. Okay. So you can listen to the sounds of nature, you can listen to the sounds of soft music. All this will help you be at calm, and you're stress free. You're able to digest the food better. So when you follow, so Dalika, the good thing is when we follow all these principles, then there is a question of debating about my paleo diet is better than your keto diet, or my vegan diet is better than your veg diet. No, that doesn't come into account at all, because we are following all the other principles.
Very true. Wow, I learned so much, and I'm very inspired to make some changes in my life actually after this conversation. So thank you so much for the insights, Dr. Rao. While we're still on food, I want to ask you about some of the trends right now. Some of the foods, diets. If you want to talk about the prana of the food that Ayurveda talks about as well, right? What is trending right now, and what is not serving our bodies?
Yeah. So in my book, I mentioned about prana. So the thing is, even though I mean that actually created a lot of problems, because a lot of people were saying, you kept a table of all the foods that were low prana or high prana, but then what do we end up with then? If everything is low prana, then what do we end up with, and what do we do? So uh, basically what happens is, if you look at the present day diets, okay, whether it's a vegan diet, whether it's a keto diet, whether it's a carnivore diet, or there's this latest one called the whole 30 diets. Now the problem is, I mean, it may be good for some people, okay, but the problem is these are all restrictive diets. Why restrictive? Because they may be serving our bodies well, but then the problem is they lack certain nutritional elements. Okay, and in the long, and nobody's done research to see what exactly happens long term. What are the long term risks? Okay, especially at the level of the heart, at the level of the kidney. Can it damage? Okay, highly processed foods, okay, juices, all these may be good at the shorter intervals, but then doing it on a prolonged intervals, we do not know what exactly is the problem. Okay, can they be more harming than good? Okay, so
Yeah.
what happens is now, when I talk about prana diets, basically the couple of things that we have to remember is that uh, canned food, tinned food, food that has been highly processed, food that is been dipped in oil for a very long time, food that is been prepared in oil for heated temperatures, all these foods are far away from their true nature. Okay, we have to remember one thing: when the food is there in our plate, we have to think about how far is this food from its original nature. Okay, so if it is too far away, then we know that those are not good. Okay, so the keto diet, the carnivore diet, the paleo diets,
Yeah.
okay, they may be good in terms of short term weight loss, okay, but they severely limit certain items in them. Okay, potential long term risks could involve kidney issues, could involve heart diseases, could involve nutritional deficiencies. Okay, could leave a nutritional gap. Okay, it's same way with juice. I mean, there's a lot of people would say, I'm going to take only juice for the next 14 days or 15 days. Okay, these are these are okay for some people, but not good
Juice
for
cleansing. Yeah.
everybody. Okay, highly processed foods, okay, white bread, donuts, potato chips, energy drinks. See, these are all low prana foods, because they are far from their original nature. Okay, they are extremely low in certain nutrients. They are very high in sugars, they're very high in salts. Okay, they are very high in sodium, which can all contribute to deleterious health. Okay, and at the same time, there's now I'm hearing more and more about people saying that we want to eat more proteins and cut down on carbs and fats. Okay, even over consumption of proteins, okay, can be unnecessary and can be potentially harmful. Okay, at the same time, yes, taking too many carbs is also not good, taking too much of fat is also not good. Okay, so you want to make sure that your diet is such that it is not very restrictive. Okay, it has all the vital elements, it has the vital minerals. Okay, and then seasonal foods, eating with the seasons. So high prana food would be something where you're eating with the seasons. See, that's another thing that Ayurveda and yoga told us. Don't eat anything that is out of season. Why? Because there is a reason why at winter time there are certain plants that are growing, At summertime, there are certain plants growing. During monsoon, there are certain plants growing. That's because those plants can fertilize. I mean, can develop and seed and mature much better in those seasons. Which means then for us also it becomes very good because the clock genes for them will coincide with the clock genes of our human body as well. So that's the reason why eating with seasons becomes an extremely important aspect
Right.
of our health. Okay, so which means then you can safely, then the question comes, how do you know what's in season? Because now with globalization, okay, everybody's getting all kinds of throughout the year. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
especially when I travel to other countries, I've seen
Yes.
vegetables and fruits that are not supposed to be during that time of the year. Mango should be only in summer, but I see mangoes here in winter as well. Okay, mangoes are not winter. Mangoes should not be eaten in winter time. They should not be eaten
Right.
during springtime. They should be eaten only during summertime. Okay, that's what Ayurveda says. So then the question is, how do you know what is in season? My best advice to for that is that go to the nearest farmers market. Farmers will always carry only those crops that they are growing, which and when they are growing it, they're not growing it at any time of the year. They grow it only certain times of the year because that's when the land is very ripe. Okay, so farmers market is the best place where you can see what is in season, and farmers market is the best place where you can see what's not in season. All right, so go there and check out what fruits they have, what vegetables they have, and just consume those to me are the most high pranic value foods.
That's awesome. So now we eat, we're following all these practices that you mentioned. Now we have to exercise. Right, Dr. Rao? And you talk about how exercise is very important. Even if it doesn't have to be hours in the gym, it can just be gentle exercises for our bodies so our bodies move. So, what happens when we don't exercise? And then what happens when we do exercise? What's exactly happening physiologically?
Very good. So in Ayurveda, they say that from physical exercise, vyayam, that's the term, Sanskrit term, vyayam or physical exercise, they say that your body and mind are light. Light in the sense it doesn't mean that you're dehydrated. It just means that your body and mind are so clear that you're able to work much better and you're able to think much better. The capacity to work, okay, increases. You're more stable, your digestion is enhanced. Okay, your impurities are removed from the body, and your digestive process functions much better. Okay, and why is that? Because they say in Ayurveda, they say that physical exercise stimulates your digestive fire, and the term that we use in Ayurveda is Agni. Okay, Agni is the term that we use for digestive fire. Now think about it as the digestive juices, the digestion in general that we have, and evidence-based studies now clearly show that a lack of exercise can bring down your digestion so that your digestive capacity is at its lowest. Okay, so what happens when we don't exercise? Okay, when you lead a sedentary lifestyle, number one, your blood circulation comes down. Okay, see, one thing you have to remember: blood flow to the muscles, blood flow to all the organs, okay, especially to the brain, will happen, okay, only when you exercise or when you keep your body moving. Okay, especially for the brain. Okay, and then the periphery, the peripheral organs. Okay, these require a little bit of heat. Okay, that's when the blood will flow into these areas. Okay, so what happens when the blood flows into the areas? It brings with it oxygen. Okay, and oxygen is
Mm.
required for normal body functioning. Okay, so that's what exercise does. It builds the heat, so there's more blood flow. Along with the blood flow, you have more oxygen. Okay, now metabolism, you are able to burn all your calories very efficiently if you exercise. Okay, okay, which means then that the chances of gaining weight is minimal. Okay, muscles and bones will weaken if you don't exercise. Okay, lack of exercise will lead to a condition called atrophy. Atrophy is nothing but
Mm.
it degenerates your bone, it degenerates your muscle, and this degeneration is irreversible. Okay, so if you don't exercise and if you lead a sedentary life at a very young age, by 30s or 40s, you will come to a stage where your bones start creaking. Okay, when you start losing your muscle mass. All right, then when it comes to people with diabetes, okay, so insulin resistance, okay, will increase if you don't exercise. But that is, cells becomes less responsive to insulin. if you don't exercise. Okay, and this can raise the risk for conditions like diabetes. Okay, and then of course, the moods the energy will drop. Okay, because when you don't exercise, there's less amount of hormones, what we call the feel good hormone release, like endorphins. Okay, and this can lead to fatigue, it can lead to stress, it can lead to depression, it can lead to poor sleep quality and poor sleep quantity. See, when you talk about sleep, you talk about quality and quantity. Both quality and quantity will get affected if you don't exercise. Okay, and then what else? Okay, one more thing that I forgot to mention: lack of exercise can also result in constipation. One of the biggest issues. If you have constipation, you are inviting trouble with all aspects of your body and brain and mind. Okay, including emotions. People who are constipated will have negative emotions. I've seen that again and again. Okay, so if you have a physically active life, you have a good bowel movement. If you have good bowel movement, then you will not have any issues at the level of body and mind. Okay, so what happens
Yeah.
now? So having said this, what happens when we exercise? When we exercise, we have a stronger heart, we have stronger circulation, we have stronger metabolism, we have good bones, we have good muscle mass, we have good brain health, our mood, our energy, our sleep, all of this improves, which means then that you are leading a good optimal life. Now at the same time, please remember, because we're talking about fractionated and unfractionated, we should never forget about that. When you are exercising, your mind and your emotions should be on that activity. There's no point in being in the gym and talking on the phone with somebody else, with your boss or with your workers, and then raising your voice. I have seen that in my gym. When I go, I often notice people raising their voice and shouting and all that, and I keep telling my mind that exercise you're doing is not helping, it's causing more stress. Okay, so even when you're exercising, you have to make sure that your mind is calm and you're focusing on that exercise, which is very important.
W- What kind of exercises do you recommend, Dr. Rao? Is it gym that is considered exercise? Is it yoga? Is it walking? Because not everyone can do everything, right? So, what
And
kind of exercise?
anything that suits you. In fact, a lot of people tell me that we absolutely have no time to do exercise. What do we do? Okay, if you don't have time, what I'll say, and then these are the people who say we are extremely busy at work, we work like 12 hours a day. Okay, and we don't have time for exercise. So such people, I tell them, okay, in that case, then don't use the elevators, use the steps to go up to your floor. Okay, even if it's 21 floors, climb up the stairs, climb down the stairs, you're finished with 1 days of exercise. It may be initially, it may be a problem because you cannot climb 21 flat of stairs, but you can build it up slowly. Every day what you can do is climb one flight of stairs, okay, one level, and then improve on that, two levels, improve on that, three levels, and so on. A time will come when your body will adapt itself so well that you're able to successfully climb 20 floors. And if you do that every day, climb up 20 floors and climb down 20 floors, your daily dose of exercise is done. You don't have to worry about going to the gym. Okay, so if you're unable to go to the gym, if you do not have a proper sport activities, if you're unable to do swimming, my suggestion is, when you come home, you're already tired. Okay, can you take a walk in your neighborhood? Just take a walk around. Okay, or even if you don't have a proper neighborhood, if you have a yard, just take few steps around the yard, just walk out. Make sure that you absorb
Yeah,
certain amount of sunlight, vitamin D, which is extremely
right.
important. Even that is a good activity. Okay, so anything. Or even if you don't want to climb up the stairs, can you place us these days, you can get a stationary bike that is small enough, which you can place it underneath
Mm,
your office desk, so that your
yeah.
legs are active. Can you do that? From what we always said, see, there's a cardinal rule: for every 75 minutes of sitting, you have to get up and do 15 minutes of stretches. For every 75 minutes of sitting, you have to get up 15 minutes and do stretches. Okay, which means then, even if you're working 12 hours in your office, make sure that every 15 minutes, after every 75 minutes, you get up and stretch yourself. Okay, and if you do that, then you don't need to go to the gym, you don't need to do anything else. And on weekends, now if you don't have much work, then on weekends you can focus on actually doing other things, like some more strengthening exercise, like aerobic exercises, dancing or zumba
Yeah.
or gym or yoga or swimming or tennis or whatever. Yeah, but there are ways that you can practice some form of movement even on a day, even in a busy life. And that to me is exercise. Absolutely.
That's very true. And exercise really does help bring some sense of mindfulness too, because then you're more conscious. The way I see it is, if I work out in the morning, then I'm more likely to eat better. And if I eat better, then I'm more likely to sleep on time, because now I want my, muscles to relax. So I think what the morning always sets the tone for the day. And so that's why I always start with something that really gives me a sense of joy and a proud accomplishment.
Some of the people that come to me, they'll say, Ram, we have absolute no time. So what I'll do is, even to such people who say they have absolute no time, I'll say, okay, do you ever go to the mall, or do you go for shopping? And they'll say yes. So then what I tell them is, let's say you're going to the grocery store. Okay, try to park your car at the farthest corner, which means then you have to come walking all the way to this grocery store. Okay, now when you fill your cart, okay, don't, and then when you put all the things in your car, don't leave the cart in the parking lot. Try to bring the cart back. Okay, walk with it back to the shop, to the store, and leave it in the store. Okay, so that way two things you're doing: you're getting your exercise, you're getting to walk with the cart. Number two, you are not blocking the parking lot with the cart, because often I've seen people blocking the parking lot with the cart. Okay, so why not just take the cart and empty cart and put it back where it was? You're getting your exercise. So number one, parking way out helps you to walk to the grocery store. That's a walking exercise. And then bringing the cart with you and leaving the cart back where it was is another exercise. So you see, just by doing that, you have increased movement in your body. Simple and best.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. I'm actually imagining in my mind the next time when I go to the grocery store, even maybe instead of carrying, if it's just a few bags that I can actually, lift,
Absolutely.
then why bring the entire cart to the
And
car?
that's a
Maybe just
that's a
lift if
strengthening
it's two, three
exercise.
bags, take
It's
it.
a
That's
it's a, it's
strength
a walking
training.
exercise and it's a strengthening exercise. You don't
Yeah.
have to worry about lifting. You don't have to worry about lifting weights. These are the
Yeah.
natural way.
And
Yeah.
so the next topic is, happiness and harmony. You talk about this in your book that, when we feel those senses, those emotional feelings that give us joy and raise our awareness, that's mindful. And there's a specific quote in your book that you say, if you take in healthy, positive impressions through your senses, then your subjective response will be to experience the feels of happiness and harmony. And that's so lovely, the statement. So how do our five senses actually help translate this into our body? And also the second part of that question is, what habits should we be more mindful to raise our awareness?
you know when we talk about that aspect, I like to bring an analogy of, and I mentioned that in the car, in the book as well. So let's say now, you have, all of us have a car, all right, and we are so possessive about our
Yeah.
car. The minute it sends off on the dashboard, when it sends off a sign saying that it needs a tune up, we'll immediately drop everything and we'll take the car to the nearest mechanic to get a tune up done. Okay, usually it's about 8,000 miles or so. Now the question
Yeah.
is, I mean, why are we doing that? We are doing that because we don't want to get caught into a stage where our cars, stop working, or we are in the freeway, and what happens if the car stops, or we don't.
Yeah.
So we don't want those situations. Now the question is, our body, we as humans, we are much more complex than a car. Okay. The question is, when was the last time that we did a tune up on our own selves? When I put that question, people are like, they smile, and then they're like, yeah, that's a very good thought, but then what are we looking for when we say tune up? What are we looking for? What is a tune up? Now think about the car
Exactly.
again. So when it's very interesting, because I have seen a lot of the mechanics. I've even requested their, when I was writing for the book, I even requested some of the mechanics to allow me to go actually into the area. It's not allowed, but they allowed me access, and I saw what they were doing. So they have a nice standard operating procedure, okay, SOP, and it's on the computer, and basically it's all different functions of the car, and they go on checking each function. Okay, brakes, tires, lubricant, okay, and then the fluid volume, the fluid, the brakes, all those things, and they keep on checking that as and when they finish working on that. Okay, so the question is, what are those things in us where we can check those marks and say, okay, we are also fine. Okay, it's maybe it sounds very difficult, but it's not very difficult.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we can do is remember that we have five portals or five gateways, okay, through which we bring in all the senses into us. Okay, these are the five sensory gateways, the five senses:
Yeah.
sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Okay, and these are the five gateways. So, sound is ears, touch is skin, sight is eyes, taste is tongue or mouth, and smell is nose. Through these five, we bring in all the impressions from outside to inside. Okay, now, are they harmonious? That you have to decide. Are they disharmonious? That I leave it to you to decide. Okay, if you're taking a high caloric based food, okay, very high caloric based food, and then you are using, a cold beverage at 10:30 in the night, through your mouth you're bringing in that impression. That is not good. That's not a good impression. On the other hand, if you're eating a nice, freshly prepared warm meal at 12 in the afternoon, okay, when the sun is at its peak, that's bringing good impression through the mouth. Okay, same thing with the sound, sense of sound. Okay, what kind of noises are you bringing in through ears? Is it harmonious? Is it disharmonious? What kind of visual impulses are you seeing? Okay, are you seeing a lot of violence, or are you seeing calmness? Okay, what are the things that you're putting on your skin? Sense of touch, is it something dangerous for the body? Because the skin is the largest organ. Whatever you put on the skin will enter the body. Okay, so what are you putting on your skin? Okay, so all these will make a big difference. So you have to make sure that whatever you're bringing in through these five senses is harmonious, is extremely good for the body, is beneficial. Only then you will experience harmony. Otherwise you're going to experience disharmony. Okay, because if you as long as you take any healthy positive impressions through your senses, your response will be that of happiness and harmony. Okay, but on the other hand, if you bring in disharmonious impressions, then all it brings is, sadness, ill health, suffering. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why it becomes very important for us to
Yeah.
make sure that we bring in harmonious impressions to the five senses. So now, based on that, then you can, think about, there are so many things that we can talk about. Okay, it's there in the book. For example, when we talk about sense of sound, okay, ears. Okay, what are the things that we can practice? So listening to the sounds of nature, listening to mantras, listening to some devotional songs is very pleasing to the ears. Okay, sense of sight. Okay, what watching the birds, watching the plants, watching, being in the forest, watching the
Mm.
waterfalls. So being in nature actually helps. uh, one of my first patients didn't have time for any treatment suggestion that I gave her. Okay, she said no to everything. So then I asked her, I said, what do you have in your close to your home? And she said, I have a park. I said, okay, go sit in the park for 15 minutes every day. Just sit in the park. She did that for six months. Just sat in the park. Okay, and then I told her just to be aware of our surroundings. So that created more benefits. Okay, and then when she saw the benefits coming into her, that's when she was ready to do other things. Okay, so it makes it makes sense
Mm.
that, we be aware of what we are bringing in through these five portals or five gateways. Okay, and so that is very important,
Senses.
because what happens is, another thing that we need to understand is, all these sensory organs are finally linked to the brain. Okay, they're all linked to the brain. So which means that
Right.
if you want your brain to be healthy, if you want to have, a clear brain, if you want to make sure that your actions coming out every day, whether you're doing your work, or whether you're dealing with your family or school or kids or whatever it is, you want a clear brain, you want clarity, you want the the light of clarity, you want to have the answers. Okay, to have that light of clarity, to have the answers,
Yeah.
your brain should be clear. And the brain will be clear only if the five sensory organs that you're through
Yeah.
which you're bringing the impressions are harmonious. Okay, because they're all linked to the brain, because that's where the processing happens. The brain processes all the information. Okay, so this is
Yeah.
how the link happens between the five sensory organs in the
Exactly.
brain.
Yeah, I always say, I say this to my functional medicine doctor too, that my brain is the most favorite organ. And sometimes the first symptoms that we see when things are not going well in our bodies are in our brain,
Absolutely.
brain fog, anxiety, and other things. And it's just so powerful. And in your book, there's one line, and I was very intrigued by this, Dr. Roy.
Mhm.
You say, disease first
Mhm.
begins with emotions, then it spreads to the mind. And when
Mhm.
that's unchecked, later it appears in the body in the form of specific symptoms. And in our modern day, where we are in an era of information overload, right, we're always in consumption mode, then creation. There's very less creativity that happens now. Because we just have everything is digital now, TVs, phones, and even while driving, our screens are, there's something digital popping up notification constantly. And because of that, we're not really using our brain to its full potential as much. And it's causing issues like lack of focus, irritability, anxiety, and other emotional issues. So, what are some ways? I know you talked about awareness of going into the park and all, but how do we actually
Yeah,
manage these
that's a very
emotions
good
when they
point you
do come
raise,
up?
because both in the Ayurvedic text and the yoga text, they talk about, how, even though we see a physical disease happening in the body, they say that this is the end product of what has happened in the emotions at the mental level, and prior to that at the emotional level. So that's the reason why they say that disease often begins first at the level of the emotions, and then once the emotions get out of control, it shows up in the mental aspect of our body, and then from there it shows up in the physical body in the form of symptoms. Okay, and this is true, even modern medicine tells you that they don't talk about,
Yeah.
the three levels, but they say the
Yes.
mind. Okay, they talk about the body mind integration, and they say that you have to manage the mind first in order to ensure that you don't have conditions in the physical body. Okay, so now the question is, then how do you observe that, how do you make sure that you manage this? You have to build in what I call as emotional awareness, okay, so in order for you to achieve balance. So I would suggest, what I do is, and I'll give you my example. What we do is, we can do like a check-in. Okay, and I mentioned this in the book also. How am I feeling right now? Okay, where
Mm.
in my body am I sensing any kind of issue? Okay,
Mm.
and if it is an emotion, can I get a handle on that emotion? Okay, so that's something, so which means then you have to be aware of it. Okay, so before the emotion takes on to a
Mm.
level where it shows up in the body or in the mind, you have to become aware of that emotion starting slowly. Okay, so for example, now let's say somebody puts a question: how come you didn't realize this? Are you not a matured person? Okay, and then what will be the reaction? Immediately our mind will say, ah, and we'll start in our mind everything. Okay, so instead of
Ego,
that, okay,
anger.
if we say,
Yeah.
okay, let me not immediately react, let me pause for some time, okay, and then think about this, and how can I answer it in a better way? Okay, so that requires, number one, awareness, and then the pause. So pause and notice. Okay, and then the second thing that I'll always like is, once you pause and notice, because you're giving yourself a time, see, the mind acts to the body through the breath. That's the reason why whenever you get emotionally upset, it first shows up in your breath, even though you
Mm.
may not be aware of it. It's the breath that starts going out of balance, which then shows up in the body. So that's the reason why in yoga they always say that if your mind is upset, if your mind is in turmoil, just pause. Okay, and once you pause, and once you notice the mind and then the emotions are out of balance, what to do is immediately start focusing on your breath. You don't want to, I'm not suggesting that you start doing pranayama practices or breathing practices. All I'm saying is, just make sure that you are consciously breathing in and out. Okay, don't, I mean, you can engage in a pranayama practice if you know what pranayama to do. But if you don't have any practice of pranayama, you don't have any practice in breathing techniques, all I'm saying is, be aware of your breath and start focusing on your inhalation and exhalation. Just normal inhalation, normal exhalation, just be aware of it, and see if you can strengthen the inhalation and strengthen the exhalations. Okay, that in itself, just by strengthening your inhalation and exhalations, you can immediately overcome the emotion. And that I've seen among hundreds and hundreds of people. People have said that they've written down their experiences. So you don't have to go very far. Just by following your breath and regulating your breath, you can work on
Yeah.
your emotions. Journaling is another one. I tell a lot of people to start writing down, if not throughout the day, but at least in the evening before you go to bed. If you can journal what emotions you had for the day, okay, and how did it show up in your words, how did it show up in your behavior, how did it show up in your body. All this will help, because then what happens is when you write down and when you look at your notes, you will be able to come to a guarded presence the next time when you have similar kind of emotions. Okay, so that's another way. The other thing that I like to do is,
Very true.
and both my wife and we practice this. If you do not have awareness, if you do not have the the breath practices, or if you know you're going to get upset, the best thing is just turn your back and walk away, and take a walk around the I do that. I just take a walk around my office. Okay, just that little walk. Okay, where I start hearing the birds, where I start watching the flowers, where I start watching the traffic, where I start seeing the goats, the sheep, the animals, the birds. In fact, in my office sitting, I often see wild turkeys. That in itself, the way those guys are playing, that in itself creates a
Wow.
different me. I mean, I'm now smiling, my lips are open, I'm now breathing much better. Okay, so all this will help
Yeah.
in overcoming those emotions, and it helps in in any kind of showdown which you don't want to have, because that will only bring more problems. So in short,
Yeah.
awareness and coming out of it, getting out of the scene is the best way to manage your emotions.
Yeah, and yoga says it very beautifully, Dr. Rao. Like you mentioned, control your breath, control your life. And I think that's the best way. And I shared with you, right? I recently started practicing yoga, and it's definitely helped me with some coping mechanisms when I'm in moments of distress or whatever it is. And the next important pillar that you talk about in your book, and I love the way you describe it as a pillar of life, and it's sleep. And considering our modern day lives with, like I mentioned, lots of devices, lots of distractions, where we want to catch up on that Netflix show because everyone at work or in class is talking about it, and we really want to fit in, so now we sacrifice our sleep. And majority of the times it is our sleep that often gets sacrificed, right? Whether it's a party that we have to go to, or we have friends over and we just want to have some time, and we convince ourselves and say that's me time, or that's my only time to relax. But w- later we regret doing that, because the next day we see the kind of symptoms we have because of lack of sleep. So what are some ways for those either who are struggling to sleep on time, wake up on time, or even just sleep in general because of stress or anything else? What are some ways they can actually enable better sleep and have sound sleep?
Yeah. So in our Vedic texts, whether it's yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta, in all the texts, they talked about the importance of good quality and good quantity sleep. And
Yeah.
now modern
Yes.
medicine tells you that 70 to 80% of the problems that we face is coming only because of lack of sleep. It
Yeah.
could be lack of good quality sleep, or it could be lack of good quantity sleep. Okay, and it's so interesting because Mohandas Gandhi actually, and I think I put that quote in my book. He
Yeah.
said, "Every night when I go to sleep, I die, and then the next morning when I wake up, I'm reborn." Okay, so that's how you should feel when you wake up in the morning. Instead of feeling very tired or fatigued, you should be able to say, "Wow, another great day. How can I, how can
Yeah.
I provide more service, or how can I make sure that this day also goes very well for me?" Okay, and so our Vedic texts talked about sleep as one of the three pillars of life. Okay, so it's very important, and researchers have done a lot of work. Sleep scientists have done a lot of work, and it may seem as if sleep is a very inactive part of our life, but no. When we are sleeping, and if it's a very good quality and good quantity sleep, there is a lot of behind the scenes activity that is going on in our body and in our mind. Okay, the brain, there's part of the brain that is especially very active, and that activity comes only when we are sleeping. For example, in our neighborhood, the person comes to pick up the trash every Monday morning. In different places it's at different times. Okay, now, and they'll come
Yeah.
only on that day, be it a new year, be it Christmas, be it Halloween, they'll not miss it. In our brains, there is a same trashing mechanism that happens, but that will happen only when you are sleeping soundly. Okay, even if you have a disturbed sleep, the trash man will not come in your brain to pick up the trash. The trash will be picked up only when you are having a continuous undisturbed sleep. Okay, that's when the trash gets removed from your brain. And now imagine if you don't have proper sleep, okay, the trash starts accumulating, and that accumulation of trash now results in all kinds of physical problems and mental problems. Okay, so that's something that we have to be very careful about. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is, remember I talked about the sleep clock gene. Okay, now melatonin is a hormone that is released that signals that you need to sleep. Okay, and melatonin, unfortunately melatonin peaks around the time when the sun is setting. Okay, and when the sun is about to rise, melatonin levels starts going down. What it means is that light will cause melatonin to fall. Okay, so that's the reason why we are going to switch off our lights in the bedroom, because if you are sleeping with a computer screen on, or if you're keeping a phone and watching things on the phone while you're sleeping, you are not going to get sleep because melatonin is not there. Melatonin gets blocked when you have light falling on your eyes. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's something that you have to remember. Okay, so you have to create a digital sunset. So switch off all the screens, switch off all the tablets, your laptops, your phones. Okay, because then otherwise it will suppress your natural levels of melatonin. Okay, and then the other thing is, keep a rhythm. Even if you have problems with sleeping, for the first few days try to go to bed at a certain time and try to wake up at a certain time. Even if you have not have got good sleep, even if your sleep is quality or quantity is very less, try to maintain a rhythm. Okay, and then what happens is, once you start maintaining a rhythm, a time comes when your body will adjust to that, when your sleep clock will adjust to the time, and then you don't have to worry, because then it resets itself. Okay, it's like resetting your computer. The same
Yeah.
thing, you reset your rhythms by deliberately going to sleep at a certain time and waking up at a certain time. Okay, and you do that even on weekends. Okay, this then strengthens what we call the, so the clock genes that I talked about, there's another term that we use in biology, we call it circadian rhythms. Okay, so these circadian
Mm.
rhythms gets established in Ayurveda. They call it achara, dinacharya, or ratrichara.
Hmm.
Ratrichara and dinachara is nothing but our circadian rhythms. Okay, so these circadian rhythms gets established once you set a biological clock for yourself. Okay, by going to sleep at a certain time and
Yeah.
getting up at a certain time. Okay, and then your bedroom. How is a bedroom? Your bedroom should be as clean and as holy as your kitchen. Okay, no clutter, no noise, no objects. It should be as clean as possible. There should be good aroma in your bedroom. Okay, there should be enough amount of air in the bedroom. Okay, so if you have to do everything possible to make it as holy as possible, because it is a beautiful sanctuary where you're going to sleep. Okay, so just like the kitchen, your
Yeah.
bedroom should be a nice peaceful atmosphere where you can, the minute you set your head on the pillow, you should be able to sleep. Vedant, I mean, yoga text tells you that your sleep should be such that when your feet rest on the bed and when your head rests on the pillow, okay, within 60 seconds, a maximum of 90 seconds, within that time you should be able to go to sleep. Okay, that is how you should be. Okay,
Wow.
so, and then of course you can always do warm herbal teas, you can do gentle stretches, you can deep, you can do some few minutes of gentle breathing practices. You can even take a walk around the neighborhood. All this will calm the mind. It will bring down this cortisol levels, it will bring down the dopamine levels. Okay, and it will improve the melatonin
Yeah.
levels. So all this will then result in a stage where you're now ready to go to sleep. Okay, so yeah, so remember one thing, Dolika, and I think I mentioned this in my book. Who is benefiting from our lack of sleep? It's the industry.
No
It's the
one.
industry.
Yes.
See, look at the things that they come out with just to induce a sleep response in us. Whether the mattress industry, whether it is the aroma industry,
The
I
rings,
mean,
the sleep
you don't
rings.
need
Yeah.
a specialized pillow. You don't need those soft mattresses. You don't need the heated mattresses. You don't need the water beds and all that. I mean, you're spending, unfortunately, huge amounts of money just to get a good sleep. Instead of spending money on all those and supporting those industries should not be there in the first place. Okay, they are minting money out of our poor sleeping habits. So we have to cultivate in such a way, we have to cultivate the right kind of habits so that we start sleeping naturally. We don't need all those mattresses and all that. Our grandfathers, our grandparents never slept on waterbed mattresses. They slept on the floor. They slept on mats. Okay, it was
Right.
like a thin mat that they slept on, and yet they experienced good sleep. So why can't we, even with the little pillows or with one or two sheets that is underneath us, why can't we have good sleep? I think So, and then of course, dietary practices play a good role. What have you eaten during the day? Okay, when did you eat it? When was your last
Yeah.
meal? What kind of meal did you eat? Okay, did you chew your meal well? Did you
Mm-hmm.
exercise? Did you keep your mind, body? I mean, did you keep your mental emotions at rest? All these will play a very big role in the final downstream event, which is your sleep.
Does meditation also help with sleep, Dr. Rao?
Absolutely. So what you can do is, in fact, the concept of yoga nidra was developed because of that. So yeah, you can practice mindfulness, you can practice stillness. Even if you don't have a proper meditation practice, you can just, as I said earlier, you can do a small breathing practice, and then,
Breath work, yeah.
just near the bed, you can practice stillness or calmness. You can either focus on something. If you don't have the habit of meditation, you can focus on some picture or something, or you can just focus on your breath, and then try to bring down all the dramas in the mind. And yeah, that in itself is meditation. Absolutely.
Yeah. And now we talked about several things. And one thing that really stood out in your book for me is selfless service. Especially in the United States, many schools actually require this for voluntary work, right? For many of us, either in schools, universities, and many even private schools too, not just public. But many of us actually stop pursuing voluntary work and we stop doing these acts of service after we get out of it, right? Get out of school, graduate from school, whatever it may be. But in your book, you talk about selfless service so much and very, very beautifully. And it really would, I think even those who don't have time will make time. That's how well you talk about it. But many of us say that we don't have time or they have commute issues. They might not have a vehicle to get to and from places, or they don't know any organizations that they can be part of to provide time. So for those people, how can they enable that selfless service? Because I know you talk about a lot of benefits. So could you walk us through that?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought this up, because just uh, 2 days back, we had a weekend conference on Ayurveda for perfect health, and I was one of the speakers, and my talk was about bringing in perfect health through selfless service.
Yeah.
The neuro. So my title was the neurochemical basis of selfless service. What happens at the level of the brain? What happens? Why is it that selfless service brings about so many important changes in your body and mind? Okay, so the neurochemical basis. So definitely there are amazing benefits that come from selfless service. People have done several different kinds of research studies, and throughout the world, irrespective of what kind of study they have, the opinion is unanimous that selfless service brings with it immense benefits. And that's one of the reasons why the World Health Organization and several European governments, including the US government, has instilled these policies about how to bring about an awareness in children and in
Yeah.
elders about the importance of selfless service. Okay,
Right.
so that's the benefits. Definitely every benefit that we talked about, whether it's in terms of good health, okay, bringing down the problems at the level of the heart, at the level of the gut, at the level of the kidneys, at the level of liver, at the level of the brain, inflammatory conditions, chronic conditions, okay, allergies, everything that's bothering you can definitely come down or can be mitigated just by selfless service. Okay, now it doesn't mean that you run to the nearest store now and do a selfless service, and then the next day morning you come and say I didn't experience anything. No, it's not about one act. You have to keep doing it again and again and again, and keep doing it, keep it as part of your day-to-day practice. Okay, now when I say selfless service, immediately people will think I don't have the time. Okay, because people will think that you have to do something, you have to get up and do something. Yes, you have to get up and do something, but that doesn't mean that you use that as an excuse and say I don't have the time. Okay,
Yeah.
a selfless service can also come about at the level of mind as well, at the level of emotions as well. What do you mean by that? The next time you see a person who you always judge emotionally, the minutes, how many people that there are certain characters in our brain, in our mind, the minute we see somebody bad, lousy guy, the minute we see somebody good, nice person, okay, that instead of saying bad, lousy, can we say bless you, selfless
Hmm.
service? Okay, the minute, so creating, instead of creating a judgment, okay, can you be a little more positive about the other person? Or, let's say, for example, now let's say you're in a car, okay, and then you see the ambulance coming by. What do? You make way for the ambulance, but that's about it. We don't even think about what's happening to the ambulance drivers or what's happening to the people who need the ambulance. So can we now, as we park our car on the sidewalk to allow the ambulance to go, can we quickly send out a well-wishing note saying that let the ambulance driver and let the ambulance occupants reach the place where they need to go safely, because after all they have to rush through the traffic to reach safely. Okay, so that's, you're sending a well-wishing thought, selfless service.
Yeah.
Let the people who need the services get the services in time, and let them go to the hospital in time, selfless service. Okay, the next time you see a fire truck, okay, let the fires people be safe, selfless service. Why? Because you're sending out a thought process. Please remember, we are all bundles of energy. The minute you create a thought process, that thought, and you direct it to somebody else, that thought will go to that person. It will definitely go there. Okay, so when you say let those people be safe, let them be able to contain the fire safely, let them not get injured from the fire, you are sending a positive thought, selfless service. You didn't do any activity, but your mind did all the activity. Okay, so
Yeah.
selfless service just doesn't mean that you have to physically do something. You can always think about it in the mind as well. Okay, now when it comes to physically, actually, yeah, you can do, there are so many things you can do. I mean, you can engage in so many, whether it's small tasks, big tasks, whatever it is, you can engage yourself in it. Even if you have very little time, check on the neighbor, check on the child, provide tuitions free, or cook a meal for somebody, or just listen to a friend. There are sometimes what happens is patients come to me, they don't want any treatment from me. They just want to talk. Okay, so I provide them that. I spend 2 to 3 hours just listening to them. What am I getting? I'm not charging them for that. I don't charge them for that. Okay, even they don't tell me that can I pay you for your services. I just listen to that. Okay, because I know that by being sounding it off to me, they are releasing the levels of cortisol from their blood, which is good for them, right? So I say, okay, no problems, sound off to me. Okay, and then make sure that your cortisol levels are reduced. So that way you
Yeah.
can do, just simply listening to somebody. Okay, or trying to create fundraising posters, trying to make wellness calls. Okay, so there are so many different ways that one can think about. I mean, I provided quite a good number of tips in my book, and
Yeah.
nothing comes up immediately, but offering a ride. So here's something, during you know um, in the Hindu tradition, every year after our loved ones pass away, we every year around that time, around the death ceremony, we do some services. Okay, so it's interesting because a lot of my American friends, they come to me and they say, Dr. Ram, we don't have things like that. What do we do? How do we remember our loved one, like our father or mother who's passed away, and today is their anniversary? What can we do to keep it alive, the memory alive and all that? It becomes like a nice day that we feel proud about. And I told them, I said, go to the, because the church has got a lot of activities where they provide food to the needy. I'll say,
Yeah.
just go there and serve a meal to those people. So, and then don't expect any gifts. Instead, try to give gifts on that day, or try to give gifts on a birthday. Okay, so what can we do, even if it's a small little change, a transformation of that kind, that is coming selflessly, where you're not thinking about, I need to become famous, I need to get a recognition, I need to get an award for doing this. None of those. Okay, that is selfless. Another thing is, a lot of the people, they argue with me saying that, I don't want to give any money to the homeless because they use it for drugs or smoking. And to them, I'll say that your act of selfless service stops the minute the dollar changes from your hand to that person's hand. It stops right there. What happens after that is not your jurisdiction. It doesn't affect you. So you don't need to worry about what that person is going to do with the dollar that you gave. Okay. Number one, first of all, my money to that person, there should be no that kind of a conflicting. My money, my is a judgmental word. It's not my money. Okay, just because I got money doesn't mean it's my money. Okay, the money that I gave to somebody else stops right at that exchange. Once it is done, what that person is going to do with that money, it's up to them. Okay, it shouldn't affect you. So having no, there should be no such judgments after doing the service. Okay, number two, even when you're doing some service, like for example, now we have situations where these are kitchens where they do selfless service, where they cook, they come, everybody gathers together, they
Yeah.
cook the food, they cut the vegetable, they cut the fruits and all that, and then they serve the food. Some people, they don't like to mop the floor. Some people don't like to do the dishes. Some people don't like to take the orders. So see, once if you are engaging in a selfless service, all those curtains of judgment should come down. Okay, you should be able to do everything. And it doesn't matter. Some people, I've heard people say, I'm a senior doctor. Yeah, you're a senior doctor at the hospital, but today you are like the rest of us. Okay, you are like the rest of us. So they gone is your stature, gone is your profession. You don't have to think yourself as a doctor. You are just another human being out here to help another human being. So don't bring those conflicting veils of your position and all that. Okay, so you should be ready to do everything. If you have to mop the floor, mop the floor. If you have to clean the bathrooms, clean the bathrooms. If you have to do the dishes, do the dishes. But do it with a happy smile, with a happy face and a smiling face. Don't do it with a disgusting face, because then that
Yeah.
entire concept of selfless service goes away with that. You should not have any kind of cortisol or dopamine release when you're doing a selfless service. Instead, you should have, not dopamine, adrenaline release. Instead, you should have the feel good hormones, oxytocin, prolactin, dopamine, serotonin. These are the feel good hormones. You should feel good about the act, whatever be the act. All right, however small, however big, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that is the power of selfless service.
Wow, Dr. Rao. That's so beautiful. Little do we realize that even showing empathy in our day to day is actually acts of service. So I really
Yeah,
hope this message actually amplifies.
yeah.
And as a last question to you, I know you're a neuroscientist by profession, and you also teach Ayurveda, and you're an expert in Ayurveda. How did that happen? And what's the message that you wish to pass to the world, and that you want to pass on as a message, it could be, right? Because you're putting in so many hours of your time, consulting and teaching and contributing in the form of your book. But what is this the purpose? Is there anything more that you're expecting? What is it?
I'm not expecting anything more. All I'm expecting is that people take, even if it's one tip or two tips that they can take from that book, or, they don't even have to take my book, any other book. Okay. As long as they follow certain principles, written down by experts. Okay.
Yeah.
And then follow it so that they experience. See, I want the society to experience good health. Okay, because in my opinion, there is a reason why we are in this world, and one of the reasons is that we are here to serve the society at the best. Okay, and if you are going to be doing things that will keep you in a stage of suffering and disease and all that, you are not fulfilling nature's reason for you to be here. Okay, so if you want to fulfill nature's reason to be here, then you want to make sure that you are always having good and optimal health. Okay, so to have optimal health, you have to follow certain rules. Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
hoping that, if those rules are being followed, if those tips are being followed, then at least they'll experience optimal health, which will then allow them to pursue those tasks that will keep society happy, that will keep people happy. Okay, after all, we are all it's a small little world. Okay,
Yeah.
we are a small little thing in a vast ocean of cosmos, and so there's no reason to be, to be throwing out our emotions and getting out of balance. We need to come back to balance. We need to be in harmony. we need to be at peace, we need to experience loving kindness. Okay, so all this can happen only if you are experiencing good health. So that's one of my goals, that's one of my reasons why I wrote the book. Okay, as to how I got into this, well, it's just, I would say, serendipity, I guess. My grandfather was an Ayurvedic physician, but of course, those days when they practiced Ayurveda, it was just not Ayurveda. They practiced all aspects of Vedic science. So he was a yoga master, he was an Ayurvedic physician, he was into Vedic astrology, he knew the stars and planetary movements very well. He knew about Vastu. Vastu is all about interior and exterior designing, and so he knew about houses and how to create loving houses, how to create beautiful houses. And so when he provided consultancy to people, and he was a priest, he was a temple priest. So when he provided consultancy, he provided at all levels, not just
Wow.
one little level of Ayurveda. He told them what mantras to recite, what planetary positions to be, what planets to pray for, what kind of yoga practices to be doing, what kind of meditation practices, what kind of food to eat. Okay, so it was a very, very beautiful, harmonious, complementary systems of healing that they received, and it was personalized. Each person
Yeah.
received based on their conditions. Okay, unfortunately, after that, this after my grandfather's generation, the next generation, none of them were in this path. They strayed off. They studied modern medicine. I mean, they studied modern education systems and all that. And some became lawyers, some became doctors. My father was an engineer and all that. And then our generation, I somehow, I mean, I till I got my PhD, and I came here to this country to do my postdoctoral research. I had no idea about Ayurveda. I took to yoga. Yes, I took to yoga because I should thank my wife for that, because she was the one who brought it up in us, saying that we need to do yoga. And we had a yoga school close to where I was working, so we were going for yoga. When we were practicing our yoga, that's when she had some health issues, and she believed in Ayurvedic treatments. But unfortunately, that was a time when we didn't have internet, we didn't have cell phones. Okay, so we couldn't just go and check to see which Ayurveda school was present. And then it just so happened, again, serendipity, I guess. It just so happened that in our yoga school, one evening, the yoga class got cancelled, and our teacher told us to attend a lecture, an Ayurveda lecture. And so it just so happened that the director of the California College of Ayurveda happened to come and give a lecture. Those days, he was promoting Ayurveda by going to all the yoga schools, because he thought
Yeah.
yoga people are more closer to appreciating the science. And so he would go out to all the yoga schools to promote Ayurveda. And then, we went to that school, we got to know more about him and his school. We went to the school, they had a clinic, so we went to the clinic. My wife got well, and then he asked me, he said, with your neuroscience background, you could contribute a lot to society. Why don't you study Ayurveda? I ridiculed the idea because I was so busy at work, I didn't have
Yeah.
time and all that. But again, nature, serendipity, and everything, all the healers, I guess, the souls out there, I think they all came together and wanted me to take this path. So they created that atmosphere wherein I could do my studies. So while I was a researcher and running a lab and all that, I was also a student. I studied Ayurveda and yoga. I got my license, I mean, I got my certification to be a yoga teacher, I got my certification to be an Ayurveda teacher. And yeah, so that's where I am. And then during the pandemic, um, actually the seeds for my book got set up when I was teaching some of these basic skills to the children in my community, to the kids, because I
Mm.
thought adults will not like this. So I started teaching the kids. So in that Bala Vihar, what we call Bala Vihar, or the children's school, I used to
Yeah.
go there and teach them good living practices. In fact, the term good living practices
Yeah.
came about from there.
Wow.
I told the parents, I said, parents, please send your kids. I'll teach them good living practices. Okay. And then one of the parents heard this and they said, why don't you write a book about this? So that's when I started doing more research and gathered all the literature and started writing a book. And it just so happened that during the pandemic, my book got released. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and then it's all history since then.
It's a very inspiring journey, Dr. Rao. And, I my journey with Ayurveda also started with my grandfather. And I think you were my first teacher
Oh,
when I started to study Ayurveda. And I'm so glad that, our connection happened and we're still in touch, even though it's 5 years post COVID. So
yep.
I'm very grateful to you that you actually really gave me that interest to continue to pursue Ayurveda in my personal life, even though I've yet to get my certification or degree that I initially started with. But I think, we there's many years ahead, and maybe again I'll get my hands on it.
And you don't necessarily have to do it. I mean, you can always practice the principles
Yeah,
of Ayurveda.
yeah,
Whatever little you can practice the principles.
yeah,
That in itself will provide you the benefits of those sciences.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. But this was an insightful conversation, Dr. Rao, and I think the message would definitely get amplified. That's my goal, and I truly, truly am grateful for your time. So thank you so much. Do you have any more parting words to
I
say?
just have one last
Yes.
statement to add, and I would say that so I'm planning to write a second book, a sequel to
I,
this.
yeah.
The only thing is the publishers want a minimum of 100 reviews on Amazon
Okay.
for my first book. Okay, so I'm
Yeah.
just appealing to everybody that I see. I'm appealing, saying that if you can send in your reviews, even if it's one line or two lines, that will help me, because then I can put out a second book that will again will be another, hopefully another beneficial book. So
Yes.
that's all I have to say to all my readers, to all the readers and
Absolutely.
all the public.
Absolutely, Dr. Rao. I'll definitely, do my share and I'll put in a review because I went through this book line by line, and that's why I came up with that's how I came up with these questions, and you can see through the foldings.
Beautiful.
So I'll
I
definitely
appreciate
share
so
this with
much.
my family as well. So thank you
Sure.
so much, Dr. Rao.
Thank you so much, Dalika, and wish you the very best.
Thank you.